Hi guys, so welcome to my gaming podcast, which is going to be called Welcome to My Gaming Issues. This is episode 1. Just an introduction to what the podcast is going to be about. It's basically going to be about three things, looking at the news of the week, but looking at it from three different perspectives. So it's the messaging perspective, the business perspective, and the gamer's perspective. And kind of talking about how, like, through messaging, communications and misunderstandings can happen, which can cause issues, how publishers and developers do what they need to do for the business, because it is quite a dangerous market, and also how how it affects us gamers and consumers as well. So as well, just before we get into the topics of the week, if you haven't heard of our channel so far, it's Gimme Stream AM if you're looking for us on Twitch, or Gimme Stream if you're looking for us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So it's a newish channel, and it's basically looking at promoting or talking about playing games, that are classic games. These are games that I've either missed out on, or new games that I'm playing as well. So these are games that are either current and they're looking more at Japanese games, story-based games, and things like that. So throughout the earlier part of the week, it'll be more classic stuff, and throughout the latter half of the week, it's going to be more modern-day stuff, focusing mainly on single-player games as well. So yeah, the topics for this week are going to be we're going to be looking at three different things really. So recently I finished a Last Guardian series, which is already up on the page, so you can check that out and see if there's anything interesting or anything you like about that, and talk about my experiences around it, and also the stuff that I've been, and my opinions really around it, but also the fact that Scalebound was cancelled by Microsoft, which is going to be an exclusive for them, and what that really means. And finally, the big news I suppose this week was the Nintendo Switch. So let's start off with The Last Guardian. So it's really weird, a story here, because if you don't know already, the game's been in development for 8.5 years by Sony. I remember I was reading once a couple of years ago that the game would have been cancelled, but people kept asking about it and wondering what was going on with it, and as a result, they just thought, even though we'd probably never make our money back on it, it's more important for our brand image as Sony to actually get that game out there and get it into the gamers' hands. People keep asking about it's too high profile to actually stop the development on it completely. But it's a bit weird one, because naturally games are obviously there as a business, but this game is so unique and so artistic that it's not really going to appeal to the masses, and as a result, they're probably almost never going to make the money back from the 8.5 years development in it. But my experiences with the game, it's a bit of a weird one. The easiest way to put it is I think it's a good game, but it's not great. I don't think for the most part the puzzles were particularly hard. I think it was a little bit simplistic, which is a bit strange coming from the fact that this is the same person who's made Eco and Shadow of the Colossus, which are quite in depth. Especially Shadow, which is, I didn't finish Eco, but I did play Shadow of the Colossus all the way through. So for that to be quite as in depth as it is, with all the different ways to kind of climb up the colossi and attack them, it kind of feels a bit weird that a lot of the puzzles were for the most part quite straightforward, which is a bit of a strange one really. I'd also say though that despite that, the story, the characterization is just amazing. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful to look at the game, even though even though it started the development in the PS3. But the characterization is just really interesting. You've got Trico, who's just this amazing bird, dog, cat thing, or whatever you want to call it, and he's just standing around and, kind of plays with himself and scratches behind his ear when he's not looking and things like that. But most importantly, you always hear the words thrown about in part of the marketing all the time, was the bond between the two, and he's just like, you think it might be just, spiel really, but in reality there is a really strong bond between the two of them. So, I'm going to dig into a little bit of spoilery territory, because I'm assuming that you've kind of seen the videos beforehand, but if not, then just skip the next bit a little bit. But basically, it was interesting that how you'll have certain moments. For example, one moment that really sticks out to me is there's a point where Trico can't carry on any further. So you kind of leave him behind because there's a drawbridge on the other side, and it's a bit of a weird one because the boy is about to go around the corner and Trico just starts, kind of moaning and kind of yelping a little bit that he's sad that the boy's leaving him alone. And then the boy's like, don't worry, I'll come back to you. And that's probably like about halfway through the game, so it's not even through the latter stages, it's kind of early on that this bond is already starting to form. And then the boy goes around and he gets into trouble and whatnot, and some monsters attack him, and they also start attacking Trico. The boy finally gets to the other side of the bit where there's a drawbridge that he's wanting to pull down, but he's about to fall to his death instead. And Trico turns around and just sees the boy in complete and utter disarray and, literally hanging on for his dear life. And this is despite the fact that he's getting spears thrown at him continuously throughout this moment, and then he just thinks, you know what, forget this, I'm jumping straight across and I'm going to save my friend. And it's pretty powerful that, he's getting stabbed and he probably should have even been able to make that jump, I suppose, because his wings weren't fully healed, yet he still kind of does it. And it's quite surprising, really. And then, as well, towards the end of the game, you have all the other Trigos who come and they try and attack the boy and try and kill the boy. And yet, your Trico, no matter what, still stands there fighting, tries to protect you at all costs, which is just pretty amazing that there's this quite in-depth relationship has formed between these two, because they're just kind of held together, really. However, my big gripe, and one of my two big gripes, is the controls are absolutely horrible. I cannot define to you how horrible they are. They're really heavy, they're really, really clunky. And some weightiness is good, but there's far too much. And there was so many times where I just basically died because I could not get the controls to do exactly what I wanted, which was really, really frustrating. And what's more frustrating is, his last game was, I suppose, in the PlayStation 2 era, but we've now gone forward 2 generations, and yet we've still got these control issues that really should have been left behind back there. And it's a bit ridiculous, but and that kind of puts me off the game a little bit, because I feel like there's something more special there, and it's one of the things that stopped it from becoming great. But it was still a good enough game overall. The other thing is that despite the fact that it's been in development for 8.5 issues, there was more than enough technical problems with that game. There was frame rate problems throughout the game completely. And it's interesting as well, because maybe that was part of the reason why Scalebound got cancelled, but we'll talk about that later, because they both have the similar concept, but they do different things with it. Overall though, I really do, and I cannot strongly suggest this, I really do love the game, or like the game even, not love it, but I really do like the game. I do recommend it for people to play as well. I'd probably argue that Shadow of Colossus was better from the same director, really. The last hour or so is really exciting and exhilarating. And it's quite nerve-wracking and intense. And the other criticism I'd say, I suppose, is there's not really that many enemy types, but the game is really fantastic overall, and the artistry is just superb, and the music throughout is absolutely amazing. And it kind of invokes a special feeling as you're playing it with the music as well, so I'd recommend it, but just be aware of the controls and the frame rate issues. So I suppose the next news that came out this week, or the first piece of news that came out this week, was the fact that Scalebound was cancelled by Microsoft. So that was a game that was developed by Platinum, or was in development by Platinum. They're the people that made the games like Bayonetta and things like that. And they've also made some of the other licensed stuff for Activision in recent years, such as Korra, to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Transformers. But Bayonetta and I'm trying to think, before they were Platinum, they worked on they were Cloverfield, a lot of the developers, and not Cloverfield, Clover Studios, a lot of the developers were, and they used to work on Okami, which is another beautiful game. And yeah, so they do have quite a lot of good games to the name and stuff beforehand, and I suppose a lot of bad ones, but this was a weird one, because I reckon they ran into the same problem. I mean, I'm just speculating here, but I reckon that they ran into similar problems that The Last Guardian did, which was basically the idea of a dragon, i.e. a big animal just like Trigo is in Last Guardian, and trying to create his AI to be working quite well, and also, having the controls be right and things like that, was difficult for him, and I think that's ultimately why Microsoft cancelled the game. I mean, the game looked good from the bits that I'd seen. It looked like it had promise, but at the same time it looked like it could have gone the wrong way as well, to me personally. And I think that's what's ended up happening for Microsoft anyway, and that's why they ended up cancelling the game. So I do think a lot of the problems probably came down to the idea of this gigantic companion being too hard to plan for. But it's a bit of a shame, really, because I remember reading once that one of the directors at Platinum said that it was basically one of the dream games that they kind of wanted to develop since they were children, and were just waiting for the technology to kind of come along and let them do that. And they felt like this was their moment, and it's a bit of a shame that ultimately it kind of wasn't. It just fell apart for them at the last second. But what's really interesting about this story as well is that Phil Spencer, who's the head of Xbox, he came out and made a really interesting statement, which was it's better for gamers this way. So I wonder what he kind of means by that. My personal opinion is it means a few things, and the first thing is that by not spending money on this game, that probably was going to end up being so-so, in their opinion. That means they have more money to spend on making a good game even better and more memorable that way. The other thing is as well that maybe that means that they don't have to spend as long waiting for other games to come out, because they're able to use the money to fund the development better. However, I think the biggest reason is because if Scalebound had come out and had been a mess and not been a success, and let's be honest, a lot of Microsoft's Xbox One exclusives are either shooters or Forza basically, and aside from that, they don't really have anything that's anything different or unique or special in my opinion. And they tried to branch out, but then you had Recall, which I haven't played yet, but a lot of the reviews it didn't do critically very well. And I think they were worried that if they had one game that was already critically not doing so well, that they tried to be different with, and then another game came along and it ended up being a mess, so to speak, and it was had lots of technical problems and didn't do critically well again, that would have tarnished the Xbox brand image. And I think that's the real reason why the game got cancelled. It's because not only was the game not in the best of states, releasing it in that state it would have been bad for Xbox, and ultimately they had to make a hard decision. And maybe it is best for gamers, maybe it's not. Maybe we'll find out when stuff gets leaked, probably on the internet in a few years' time, showing what it could have been. You never know, maybe somebody else will pick it up, but probably not, to be fair, with how these publishing deals often go. They probably can't share it with another publisher for a while, but you never know at the end of the day. Okay, cool. So the last thing to talk about, I suppose, for today is the Nintendo Switch, which is the new hardware that is coming from Nintendo. It's basically, if you haven't seen it already, it's a tablet that has two kind of controllers that look a little bit like Wii remote stuck onto the side of it, and then you can dock it and connect it to your TV, or just pull it out instantly. It will switch your TV off, or your display off the TV, put it onto the display of the tablet, and then you can walk out and play with it on the go. So it's basically a home console that you can take away with you. It's interesting as well because the dock just seems to be more or less connecting it straight to the TV, or at least that's what they say. The official rating is it's just connecting it to the TV and not really doing much more. The Joy-Cons are particularly interesting actually for me personally, because I mean, if you've seen the pictures, you might have seen that you can get them in grey or neon red and neon blue. But what's interesting is that there's a lot of technology that seems to have gone inside these new Joy-Cons that they call them, which by the way is just a ridiculous name itself. But the Joy-Cons are basically, there's a lot of technology in them in terms of they've got what they're calling HD rumble, which is basically more precise rumble, and apparently some of the demos that they've tried out are actually particularly good, and you can really feel the pinpoint precision of it. But also because I'm saying that they act like two controllers, which is quite interesting itself. Because I suppose the idea of acting like two controllers, you can just hand it over to someone else and play like that. But also when you do take them apart, you can see that there's actually two trigger buttons on the inside, which is quite interesting within itself. It's like you've got the larger triggers in general, but then you've got two smaller ones when you take apart these controllers and using it in a two-player game to kind of try and get more or less a fully fledged controller. There was also the idea of an infrared camera, I think it is, on one of the Joy-Cons, which will be able to detect simple gestures, which is pretty cool, I suppose. And then you can take them off and you put them in this grip, and basically that would be like your normal equivalent of a controller. But you can also play them with at the side of the tablet, and also just wirelessly, like two Wii remotes in your hands. The other thing that they showed was the Pro Controller, which was quite cool as well, because the Pro Controller was basically just like a normal Xbox pad, or the Wii U Pro Controller, or like the Xbox or PlayStation 4 DualShock 4 pad, I suppose. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. It's completely different to most of the consoles I suppose really any of the console that we've seen. You can tell it's been influenced by the past that they've done. You've got in effect the Wii remotes in there, and then you've got the tablet screen of the Wii U. But it's still quite different and quite unique. And the price was particularly interesting as well, because it's basically selling for £280 here in the UK. That's what's been set by the retailers anyway, at $299 in the US. Which, from what I understand, a lot of people wanted it more at the $250, £200 range. So it's a little bit more than what people are expecting. But then at the same time, you have the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox 360, which might have been cheaper now, but when they first came out, they were £350. Sorry, Xbox One even, they were £350 or £430. So it is still cheaper than both of them put together. And I suppose it's not as powerful though, which is very clear when you look at some of the games and the way that they've been set up. And obviously it's mobile technology at the end of the day, which has come a long way, but it's still not going to be as powerful as a fully fledged PS4, Xbox One, or a PC. But what else was really interesting is they're clearly trying to make online gaming more of a thing for them. And how they're doing that is they're investing in the infrastructure, which, let's be honest, has always been quite bad by Nintendo in terms of online. But it's always been a mess. There's never been enough features, and it's not been easy to add your friends to it as well. But what's interesting is to say, you'll have a free trial period from like now till I think it's the autumn, or fall as the Americans might call it, and then after that you'll have to pay for the service. And then the service as well, they've tried to kind of compete with PlayStation and Xbox One. Now PlayStation and Xbox One give you 4 free games on Xbox and Xbox One, Xbox One and Xbox 360 even, and 6 free games across the PlayStation consoles. And they're basically saying their way of kind of competing with that is 1 free SNES or NES game a month, and even then you can only use that game for a month, which is quite interesting. I understand that they're trying to compete, and I understand they probably make a lot of money from Virtual Console, but I don't know, maybe it's just me personally. I suppose it's better to have something than nothing, but it kind of feels a little bit lackluster in that sense. They should have probably tried at least let you keep it maybe, but I don't know, or at least give you maybe more for that trial period, so to speak, for the month. And then you kind of like, it's almost like you rented it for the month, and then after that you either need to pay for it or you can't, or you lose access to it. So it's a bit of a weird one. And yeah, so also what I think is quite interesting is this free trial is great, and I understand they want to draw people in. However, I do think it's not going to do them much benefit if they only have the trial period for the first 6 months, because depending on what I'm calling this first 6 months, because depending on when Super Mario Odyssey comes out, which we'll come on to more later, a lot of people might not even pick up the console until that period. So you've got this few months where no one or fewer people are going to actually have exposure to the console and therefore online. Then you're going to say to them, right, try out the online, or rather here, pay for the online, but you haven't had the trial to begin with. So it's a little bit of a mixed one, and I think they should probably consider actually extending that period out and having it more available for people to use. And the conference itself, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it was a little bit all over the place, to be honest with you. One thing that was very consistent, and I don't know if you noticed this, was the messaging in terms of every time a new person came out, and every time they showed the videos of the Nintendo Switch, they had the idea of the console dropping into the dock, but every time it was somebody clicking their fingers to kind of represent that we're switching over to the next person, that we're switching over to the TV, that we're switching over to the video. Very consistent messaging. It was really interesting actually to see that, continuously using the click as a symbol of the Switch, and even on some of the videos when the logo kind of comes down to kind of show the console docking, so to speak, it does again make that clicking sound. Very, very consistent. It was quite interesting to see. The launch games, however, and I'm a little bit iffy on these launch games. So we've got Zelda, great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the Zelda game, absolutely fantastic. But obviously, you can also get it on the Wii U. However, what's interesting is kind of some of the other games that have been re-released. 1-2 Switch, it's basically clearly tapping into the Wii Sports type market. It's designed to be more of a dual game, and 2 people have 1 controller each or 1 Joy-Con each, and kind of like have these little duels and then compare the results at the end. But you've also got like games like Bomberman, Skylanders, Just Dance. Let's have a look in my list. Disgaea, Puyo Puyo Tennis, Rayman Legends, Steep, I'm Setsuna. So a lot of these games are either out already or they're going to be available on other consoles, which is fine. But from Nintendo, all you've got is Zelda, which is again going to be on the Wii U anyway, and 1-2 Switch, which is probably going to be an alright game, let's be honest. But it doesn't seem anything wow or anything like that from the little bits that I've seen, but I could be wrong, you never know. It seems like a little bit of an odd launch lineup, really, to be honest with you. This is quite interesting, really, but I mean, it's Nintendo. They'll probably have something good anyway at some point down the line. They always do really good games. But then the launch window is quite interesting as well. The launch window personally is more exciting. So that's after the launch lineup. So you've got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is an upgraded version of Mario Kart. Improved battle modes are saying they're going to be 5 new characters, which let me have a look. We've got King Boo, Inkling Boy, Inkling Girl. Those are from Splatoon, Dry Bones, and Bowser Jr. It also includes the DLC from Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U, and it has a couple of new vehicles as well. So that's a decent upgrade, but depending on what price they charge for it, it probably isn't worth, I suppose, the full upgrade. Because yeah, okay, so there's some decent content, but if it's like a full £40 a game or whatever, I don't know if that extra content justifies that. I suppose it depends how much better the battle mode is, because it does let you be able to use 2 items and stuff instead of 1, and things like that. However, the real game, that just looked fantastic for me when I saw it, aside from Splatoon, which by the way I'm absolutely looking forward to, because I loved the first Splatoon game, and Splatoon 2 just even better. And I suppose there's Xenoblade as well, which isn't for me personally, but I know a lot of people do like Xenoblade, so it'll probably be quite a good one that'll be coming up from. But Super Mario Odyssey is what I'm really looking forward to. If you haven't seen the trailer, go and check it out. It looks absolutely fantastic, and it's basically a real world hub looking thing, with real world inspirational buildings. Real world buildings inspired. Inspired from real world. I cannot speak today at all, but yeah, buildings inspired from real world. But what was quite cool for me was the little hat throwing mechanic, and how he flings his hat across the gap, and then Mario jumps on the hat and then jumps back across. What was a little bit weird though is how Mario's kind of shorter than most of the humans around in the game, but whatever. They've got to keep their look, I suppose. So Arms looks like a really interesting game, because it looks like Wii Boxing, but a little bit more depth. One of the headlines that I read, and maybe this is the case, maybe not, but a lot of the comparisons that I'm seeing across quite a few gaming sites is basically Wii Boxing meets Splatoon, which could be something quite special there. I think the jury's out a little bit. It looks really good, but I think we need to see a little bit more of it before we can kind of determine whether it is actually good or not. One of the other launch window games is Lego City Undercover. I mean, a great game. I played it on the Wii U, and I've even got my little chase mechanic, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I'm a little bit unsure about that one. I mean, it's a great game, but it's already out, and it's going to be coming out on PS4 and Xbox One anyway. 2 games that were quite interesting to see there on the list was Skyrim and FIFA, but what was more interesting is Skyrim and FIFA, the wording of it was quite interesting of what the game's actually called. So Skyrim is just being called the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, so it doesn't look like the PS3 version from the little bit of the clip that they showed, but it does look a little bit better quality. But by the seams of things, it's not the full remastered version, because I think if it was, they would have called it the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim remastered version or definitive edition or whatever it's called. Yeah, it's quite interesting that they haven't gone for that name, but they've kind of stuck more towards the original name. I think that this isn't the full remastered version that is out on the other consoles. It's basically a slightly scaled down in terms of quality, probably. Or there's maybe a different feature or 2 or something like that, which we'll find out over time. But I think that's why they haven't called it the definitive edition or the remastered edition, because they just don't want it to be kind of tied in with that, because it's not quite the same. And FIFA had the same problem as well. FIFA on the graphic just said EA Sports FIFA. It didn't say FIFA 2017, 2016, or anything like that. It just was blatantly called FIFA, and that's it. So again, I have a feeling that's going to be the same type of issue. Maybe there's problems porting these games across, or there's not enough power there on the Switch. But again, EA Sports FIFA is just called FIFA. It's not called 2017. So by that logic, I personally would think that it's not going to be the proper FIFA game that's going to be out on the PS4 and the Xbox One. It's just going to be a FIFA variant, so to speak. Which, I mean, there could be really good games. They could have new features that could be better and stuff, but it's kind of interesting the way they worded it for me. It's maybe the console's not powerful enough, or maybe there's just maybe they can't just do the straight ports properly in the time that's allowed for them. Overall though, I think the console seems pretty decent. I personally would be getting one, but not at day one. I have this whole thing where every time I buy a Nintendo console, I always end up regretting it, because shortly afterwards they end up releasing a limited edition version of the console, and I'm always like, oh, I should have got that limited edition version instead. So I'm going to try and avoid doing that this time, and basically just try and hold off until a limited version of the console is out. Then the 2 SKUs are a bit interesting as well, because it's just you've either got a grey version or a neon orange and neon blue version, which is a little bit weird because I think the two SKUs are probably a good idea, but maybe they could have had more hard drive space in it because all it has is 32 gig, but you can put an SD, XC or HC card, so it can go up to like whatever's available. I think when I was having a quick look, the highest card I saw was 200 gig. Probably not that much, but then when Zelda Breath of the Wild apparently is 13 gig, maybe it's not the end of the world at the same time. But yeah, I think it seems pretty good. Pretty good console, and I'm definitely going to be getting one at some point in the near future. But yeah, I am still holding out, and I think it's going to be a little bit touch and go. It's quite risky, the strategy that they're going for, but at the same time, I can't tell if it's going to be a success or not, or a failure or not. Really, it's too soon to tell, I think, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this console develops. But you know, it's going to be a good one. It's good. It's going to be one to keep an eye on. At the very least, the games that Nintendo release are going to be fantastic because they usually are. I mean, that was the weird thing about the Wii U. Absolutely no sales in comparison to some of the bigger consoles. I think it was Nintendo's worst performing console ever. But the games on there were fantastic, and there was a high attach rate. There was a lot of games that were being sold to a person that actually had a console, and at one point, in the early days as well, there was 4 games per console. So it's quite interesting to see, and maybe something like that will happen with this one, or maybe it will actually be the big hit that they want it to be. I kind of hope it is a bigger hit, just because I want Nintendo to stick around for as long as possible. I know financially they are in trouble, but if they keep having kind of duds in consoles, they probably will end up falling into trouble. So I don't know. It should be a good console, but it's going to be interesting to see how it develops over time. So yeah. So I think that's more or less it for today. So just to reiterate what I said at the start, this was Welcome to Gaming Issues episode 1. Also, please do check out our channel and subscribe and share our stuff if any of it seems good. So a newish channel on YouTube, playing video games throughout the earlier part of the week. We'll be playing classic games. These are games that I've either missed out on or games that I'm revisiting. So I'm in the middle of a Resident Evil series in preparation for the new game. And then throughout the latter half of the week, it'll be more current and upcoming more current games, such as Japanese games, story-based games, single-player games for the most part. So yeah, check us out if any of that sounds good, and I'll be trying to do a weekly podcast for as much as I possibly can, and talking about the news of the week from the 3 different perspectives, which is the messaging, the business, and the gamer's perspective. So yeah, if any of that sounds good, and if you like any of our content, then by all means check us out, and please do share and subscribe. Right, thank you very much. Take care, guys.